Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Culture Advantage podcast. I am so excited today to be talking with Mita Mallick. Mita, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited for our conversation today.
Awesome. I'm really excited. I mean, I've read both your books, and what I love about them is the way that they're so packed with information and insight and actionable content, but they're also just really good reads. Like they're fun to read and they're interesting to read. And that's something that's really close to my heart as well in whatever I write or whenever I'm speaking. Because as you know, if you write the most brilliant stuff, but people don't get through the first few pages, it doesn't really matter what's in there. It's not going to do any good for the world. And so it's so clear that you take that really seriously, which I love. Could you say any more about that, your approach to this work in general?
First of all, thank you so much. That means a lot that you've read both my books and you've enjoyed them, and I'm here on your podcast. I really think about how do you capture someone's attention when there's so much content out there. People say to me, why is it so much harder to write and publish a book? Well, the barriers to entry are gone, which is amazing. And there's a lot of competition for books, but also there are podcasts, there's YouTube. There's so many other ways for people to learn that didn't exist, let's say, even 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And so I really think about how do I draw people in with the story? And particularly for this most recent book, The Devil Emails at Midnight, what good leaders can learn from bad bosses. Even with that title, I was like, the cover is a movie trailer and I love movie trailers. And so get people excited. And it is, as a marketing executive, I know that title was a choice. There were people that would be drawn to it or pushed away from it. And then how do I get people excited about the stories I tell? And then it's not a novel, it is a business book. So I draw people in with stories and then I leave actionable tips and advice.
Yeah, the book is so great from so many different angles, right? Whether you're somebody who manages people and you want to do better, or, you know, probably all of us have had the experience of having a bad boss and remember things that bad bosses did and stuff that's almost like too wild to even believe. Folks should get this book and read it until you do, just to sort of summarize, you know, what I take out of it is, you know, bad bosses are not necessarily bad people. And they're not even always bad bosses. But they often do very bad things. And that really matters, like to people, to organizations. And it happens in some common ways that bosses behave badly, and we can describe those and give them archetypes like you do, and then learn from it to create better workplaces. Like, is that a fair summary?
Can I bring you on my tour for the book? That's it. That's it. Thank you. That is exactly the summary. We can end the conversation. You nailed it.
No. We cannot. That's great. So I guess I wanted to ask, like, how there are many books that you could have written. How did this idea come out specifically? Like, what led you to this book?
So it was a very specific, traumatic family moment that brought this book out. And it was my mother's home a few years ago was flooded and nearly destroyed. And it was a cold New England day and the pipe burst. And here we are in her home. As you've been in, anyone who's listening who's been in a house ravaged by fire or water or the elements, there's trauma. And so I'm in my childhood bedroom trying to save things. I have Barbie dolls that I thought would be worth something someday on eBay. They're soaked, trophies, medals. Think about all the things we hold on to. And Michael, I find a notebook from my 20s and I love a good journal. And this is a career journal. And I'm looking through it and it has like all of these powerful vignettes, all these stories, details of particular bosses I worked for during this time. And it was a lot of emotion. Like you're coming off the pages and I'm driving away with my mom from her soaked home and our car's packed with things. And I keep thinking about this notebook and I thought, God, this is a Mean Girls burn book moment, right? Because I could be in someone's notebook. I could be in someone's notebook. And that's what I started thinking about because I've been the person who has contributed to the marketplace literature. The number one question I get How do I survive a bad boss? How do I spot a toxic work environment? People
Mhm.
reach out to me with really painful stories, but I thought, what if we are the person who's knowingly or unknowingly doing this? What
Mhm.
if we have the potential capability to be a bad boss? And the
Yeah.
opening line of the book is, I've been a bad boss, and chances are so have you. So it was actually
Yeah.
finding that notebook, and I started thinking about what can I share with people in a different way and have them
Mhm.
reflect into a mirror and look at themselves and admit, yeah, I've actually done these things. Maybe not to the extremes of the individuals, some of them that I include in the book, but
Right,
we
right.
all can relate to having done that to someone.
Yeah. Just reading your book brought up so many memories for
Oh
me that
gosh,
I probably haven't thought of in 20 years,
yes,
right?
so
Like
true.
some of those things you saw in that journal must have been memories you hadn't even thought of in a
No, I
while.
hadn't, and it flood. And you know, you when you read something you've written, your younger
Hmm.
self wrote, and the
Yeah.
emotion and the power, and it brings you right back to that moment in that cubicle when that thing
Yeah.
happened, or at the desk, and you're like, "Wow, I
Hmm.
totally had buried that memory."
Right, right. Could you, I mean, until folks have read it, are there one or two stories from the book? Because
Mm.
they're so vivid. Are there
Yeah.
one or two that come to mind that you would tell people just to give an example of these archetypes you give and the stories that came out?
Well, I will warn people that when you read the book, everyone's nicknamed for a reason. And I do that because, listen, don't we love to romanticize villains? What is it about the sort of romanticizing of the bad boss? So we also do that, I think, to disassociate in those moments that are
Yeah.
really horrible when a boss really impacts your mental health. I
Yeah.
will pick, we'll start with the lighter one, which is the napper. And this was the boss who, and credit to my mom, I took an interview with this company. Would you believe I did 12 interviews in a day?
Whoa.
And
Whoa.
big beauty brand, fancy title, I had to get the job. And my mom said to me, did they offer you a glass of water? After I tell her how excited I am over FaceTime about this. And I'm like, no. And she's like, don't take the job. And I'm like,
Wow.
what? Mom, mom, no, I'm taking the job. I take it within 24 hours, accept it. And the water test, as I say, my mom is coined. It's right because
Yeah.
how people treat you during the interview process, it's a window into what it's like to work there. And I will
Yeah.
also say, I interviewed with the napper during the
Hmm.
process. He was to become my boss, and guess what? I didn't really like him that much. My
Hmm.
instincts knew, but I liked everyone else. They gave me a
Yeah.
bunch of fancy samples. I start this job, and I will tell you, this is the boss who fell asleep in every meeting.
Oh my
Small
gosh.
meetings, large meetings, didn't matter. He'd fall asleep right here on this podcast. And so you people listening are like, okay, and so maybe he had an issue with an addiction.
Hmm.
He had sleep issues. Maybe he was fighting with his partner. Maybe, but here's what ends up happening is we fast forward through the story. He's sitting in the desk next to mine, actually next to the vice president's office in a cubicle, and is taking calls from recruiters in this
Wow.
open setting. Like,
And
talk about the middle finger, talk about such disengagement. Shows up whenever he wants, leaves whenever he wants, is also
wow.
talking loudly about how much it sucks to work there and all these
Oh my
things. And you
gosh.
ask yourself, why did this person stay so long? Because
Yeah.
what you tolerate, the worst behavior you tolerate defines your culture. And
Yes.
years later, I'm like, why did this happen? And why do we allow disengaged individuals to stay? Listen, I've been the disengaged
Yep.
individual, guilty as
Hey,
charged. But
everyone at some point.
yeah, but can we have the courage to ask people what's going on and ask them what it would take for them to be happy to work here again? What would
Yeah.
it take for you to recommit? And
Yeah.
it's really toxic when it is a leader who's
Yeah.
disengaged because they are infecting everyone on the team with that disengagement. So
Right.
that is the napper.
Okay, that's a lighthearted one. You said, I imagine you were going to give us a more serious one as well.
Yeah, I'll go to Medusa, which
Mm.
was until this point in my life, no one in my life, not my parents, not my brother, not my husband, no one had ever screamed and yelled at me. And here I am working for this woman. She
Mm.
is the equal opportunity bully. She goes after everyone. She privately, publicly humiliates. She
Mm.
screams. She yells. She throws tantrums like a toddler. I didn't have children at
Mm.
the time, but now I understand, right?
Mm.
Tens, threw a Chanel shoe at a colleague,
Oh my
missed her
gosh.
head. I mean, P.S. It's funny. I posted something recently on social media on like funny trauma from bosses because you either laugh or cry. And she wore so much Chanel. It's like the devil wears Chanel. I don't know what she was getting paid. And it wasn't Rent the Runway because she had the same pieces, right? So I'm like, I don't understand how you can afford this, but fine. And,
Yeah.
years later, Michael, I didn't realize that I have nothing against Chanel, but I actually had trauma from it.
Oh
Chanel
my
number
gosh.
5. And then
Uh-huh.
a very close friend of mine now loves Chanel, and it's because of her. I'll like go into a store now. But I used to be like, not really, but there's no reason to not be a fan of Chanel, except that this woman
Yeah.
who traumatized me was head to toe in it.
Oh, smells can trigger all that,
Yes,
right?
yeah,
Oh my
it's
gosh.
wild. But
Mm-hmm.
but again, it's like what I don't understand about leaders who use fear as a motivation in the workplace. Here's what happens, and here's what happened to me. So fear actually drives short-term results. It kills culture in the long term. And
Yeah.
so what happens is if I'm working for her and I'm scared. I am scared.
Mm-hmm.
So I come into work every day thinking I can outwork the bully. And if I just work harder and faster and exceed whatever metrics she set, she's going to leave me alone.
Yeah.
Guess what? She doesn't
Doesn't
leave me
work.
alone.
Mm-mm.
And then you start to get tired. It's exhausting to be constantly scared, that adrenaline rush. And then
Oh
you
yeah.
start to say, it doesn't matter. She's going to come after me anyway. So you start to care a little less. You start to go under the radar. You start to slowly disappear at work.
Yeah.
And you are either going to be put on a performance improvement plan. We know how this goes. Or
Mm-hmm.
you will leave on your own
Yeah.
because you will no longer stay at that company.
Right. Right. And that's, I mean, sometimes people think, haha, bad bosses do funny, bad stuff. What's the big deal? But like you're pointing out, this is a huge deal.
It is.
Like people work so hard to try to work on the culture of an
Yeah.
organization. And yet, when you have people like that, they're destroying it. I mean, when you think of that definition of culture you gave, which I love, I always talk about that too, the worst thing that happens that we
Yes.
tolerate, when you think of it that way, it's like, God, our culture is horrible then,
Yeah. And what
right?
I wish when you say this, and it's such an important point, is that I wish that more leaders understood the cost of bad bosses, not just to our own mental health. And you've seen the stat I included in the book that's circulating widely, is that more than your parent, your partner, your children, your best friend, your boss is the person
Yeah.
who can negatively impact your mental health, which actually,
Yeah.
lots of head nods. It actually makes sense. But
Mm-hmm.
if you actually looked at what a bad boss cost in terms of productivity, and what if you actually had it reflected in the P&L? And what do I mean by
Mm-hmm.
this? It's turnover cost, right? I
Oh
go back to
yeah.
Medusa. She turned over one team of 11 or 12 people, and then they moved her
Yeah.
on to this other team that I was voluntold to go work on. And guess what? Within 18 months, that whole team turned over. And
Right.
so what ends up happening is the person in charge is calling recruiting and saying, I need butts and seats. And then recruiting is trying to, not knowing or able to solve the root cause. They're
Yeah.
just constantly trying to fill seats that keep
Yeah.
turning over. And
Yeah.
what a huge cost to the organization.
Huge cost. You have 13, right?
Yeah.
13 archetypes. I want to know some that were on the brainstorming list that didn't make the final cut. Were there others that you had in mind that you wanted to talk about?
Um, there's ones where it's like, the boss who's the popularity contest. They'll do anything to be liked.
Yeah,
A reporter who was interviewing me once said it was like prom queen.
that's
But it's
good.
like it's an interesting one where, and this is going to happen, particularly
Yeah.
in the environment we're in, when you start to work for your peer,
Mm-hmm.
or you become the boss of your peer. You and
Yep.
I
Yep.
were close, we were in the trenches, peers, and now you
Yep.
report into me. How does
Yep.
that change? What does that mean?
Yep.
And how do you then still have a relationship where you show that I recognize and value you, but we're no longer friends and peers. I'm
Yeah.
not in charge. And I see people
Yeah.
struggle a lot with that. And that's
So
really
much.
hard. And also in some cases, we're still besties, and I still will overlook all of the areas of opportunity you have
Yep.
and continue to promote you and pay you. And I'm painting you in a bad light here. This would never happen. But and then everybody else is like, well, why does he's not even doing any work? But oh, they're
Yeah.
friends. They're
Mm-hmm.
friends. And so that's one of the ones. If I had a 14 and 15, maybe I'll do a sequel. We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
There's many more on the cutting floor, as
Yeah.
they would say.
Yeah. That's a
Yeah.
big one. Like I'm not your boss, I'm your friend.
Yes.
I've seen that a lot. Another one that came to mind, and this they're all related in
Yes.
some way. Many of them are related, but one that came to mind specifically for like nonprofits and mission-driven
Oh,
organizations
yes.
are the boss that's so passionate about the cause
I
that
love that.
that's like the excuse for all of the bad behavior, right? Because they care so much.
You know what's really interesting in working and advising for profits versus nonprofits? There's something
Mm-hmm.
really interesting about nonprofits where gaslighting occurs around the mission. So we
Mm-hmm.
have this mission to save the world and save
Yep.
people and serve. So we could never behave this way. And if we
Yes.
do, you're
Yes.
imagining
Yes.
it, is what you're
Mm-hmm.
saying. And so
Yep.
that is an interesting one because in a for profit, we're here to make money.
Yeah.
We're here to sell you as much stuff that you don't need or try to surprise and delight you or actually enhance the quality of your life, whatever
Yep.
you're selling something.
Yep.
Where for profit, nonprofit, as you point out, is in service of, and you can actually
Mm-hmm.
weaponize that and
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah, for sure. I see
Yeah.
that all the time. So you talk, like you said, bad bosses are made, not born. Um, and often they're just really good at their job. So they get promoted and promoted because of
Yeah.
that, but nobody taught them
How
to,
to lead people.
right, how to lead people or why that matters
Yeah.
or how to do it. So if I'm a boss, if I'm reading this, there's tons of valuable tips in there. What if I'm the CEO or,
Mm,
an executive leader and I don't want any of my people managers to be a bad boss? And I've got, let's say I'm a huge organization and I've got 1,000 people who
sure.
manage others. What can I do organizationally in terms of the systems and
Yeah, I love
practices
that
that I
question.
set up?
Well, what gets measured gets done. So if it's really important
Hmm.
to you, because I always say, people say, what's the job of a leader? How do you define a leader? A leader's job is to create more leaders. So
Yeah.
if you're the CEO and I work for you and I'm your chief marketing officer, let's say, you should be watching to see how am I developing talent?
Yeah.
Who's leaving? Who's staying? Who's getting promoted? Do I have development plans for people? And am I thinking
Hmm.
about how to rotate and push people? Am
Yeah.
I promoting people? Am I holding people back? Am I being a talent hoarder? All of these
Hmm.
things you can be measuring, and then you can then tie it to my pay. You can say
Yeah.
to me, listen, from the business perspective, you exceeded our revenue target. You signed these clients, et cetera. But if I look at your turnover, you lost 5 key members of your team, and that cost us. And
Yeah.
there's always a story and there's always excuses. But at the end of the
Hmm.
day, they left under Mita's leadership. And so you will make
Hmm.
a call that I won't get paid the full bonus. Right.
Hmm.
And so that's when I think things start to change is that when you hold people, I mean, money talks, right? And
Yeah.
you're holding it accountable in the performance. And so I just listed a number of things. You don't have to start with all of those. You can start by measuring one. You're
Hmm.
going to hold leaders accountable to
Yeah.
how they grow and develop their teams.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so rare. I mean, I've been part of lots of, leadership development trainings and
Sure.
things like that, but it's rare to find an organization that puts enough time and effort into that
Yes.
because it is so important and so poorly executed
It
so
is.
often.
And what's such a big miss is that people don't realize, enough people, leaders don't realize, and like the CEO, for example, in your case, if you hold me accountable to that, and I have a strong reputation of developing people and being a good leader, you don't have to be knocking on recruiting's door to get me talent. People are going to come want to work for
Hmm.
me in the company because
Yep.
you, as a CEO, have a reputation. I have a reputation as your leader. You'll
Yep.
find it much easier to actually attract talent because
Yeah.
people will want to work for you.
Yeah. Amazing. What about, and I see this a lot, I'm sure you do too. What about when the bad bosses are the really high performers?
The toxic rock stars.
Exactly.
Well, but here's the
Exactly.
thing. You have to get under the hood. It's like,
Mhm.
what is it? Because that's not going to last forever.
Right.
Likely, what is that person doing? They're scaring people
Mm.
into driving results. They're having massive turnover.
Yeah.
So they actually drove this team to achieve results in this year. And then next year, that whole team's turned over and has to be replaced.
Yeah.
So if you actually look under the hood and the details, it's all propped up. It's a house of
Yeah.
cards,
Yeah.
usually.
Yeah, for sure. You can tell, when you're doing like a talk for an organization or at a conference or something, and you can judge like how much you're nailing what people are experiencing by the head nods.
Yes,
And
yes.
you just say toxic high performer boss,
And
and
then
the room
everyone,
is
yeah,
like, oh my God,
yeah,
like let me tell you
yes,
about mine.
yeah.
Right. Um, and yet, and this is, I think, is something really important too. And you talk about this in the book, how speaking up, how trying to
Mm,
give feedback about a boss can be really hard and risky for you,
yeah.
right? And certain, I've had that experience. Like, what could organizations do to get this really valuable feedback instead of people just swallowing it and dealing with it and then quitting as soon as something better comes along?
Well, my hot take on this is don't ask for feedback if you're not going to do anything with it. Don't do it.
Yeah.
Cancel your employee surveys, cancel your
Mhm.
360s. Honestly, if people are not ready to receive the feedback and sit with it and process it and action it, it doesn't
Yeah.
mean that you have to agree with it. It means that you're willing to listen to a different point of view. And we're all
Yeah.
human, we get defensive. But that's the number one mistake I see people do is you say
Yeah.
you want the feedback. I've worked for organizations where they're like, bury the feedback. What? Or they're like, that's not true. What do you
Right.
mean it's not true?
Oh,
This
right.
isn't true. You need to go resurvey people. What?
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
like that's like the biggest thing I see. But
Hmm.
then it is the art of being able to accept feedback because
Yeah.
we can give it, but then can we accept it? And one of the
Hmm.
things, if you're leading a team and you want to get feedback from your team, don't do this. Do not say, what do you think I should do differently? Anytime a boss says that to me, I feel like it's a trick question.
Hmm.
Like I'm being recorded. It's like some show. I'm like, no, don't say the truth, right? And I
Yeah.
remember one time I did that with the boss, and I was like Brene Brown, clear as kind, and he
Yeah.
lost his bleep. He was like, "What?
Yeah.
That's not true. That didn't happen." You're like, "Okay, so what happened next time?" Never asked him again.
Right.
Never. Anytime he asked me, I'd be like, "All good."
Yeah.
Nothing to say. So, one of the things I like to do is, let's say you were working for me, we're having coffee this coming Friday, and we're talking about a project. I would write to you and I'd say, "Hey, Michael, I'm really excited for our meeting on Friday. I am excited to talk about this project. I also wanted to talk to you about my career development. I've been really thinking about things I would like to work on as a leader, and I would really like to be able to delegate, work faster to the team, and make
Yeah.
decisions more quickly and not be a bottleneck. I would appreciate your coaching when we talk." Notice I
Yeah.
didn't say feedback, right?
Yeah.
There's a few
Yeah.
things. One, I put it in writing so you have
Hmm.
time to absorb it and you're prepared. So I'm not in the moment. Michael, what do you think I should work on? Tell
Yeah.
me, right?
Yeah.
Number two, I was vulnerable and I didn't do an open ended. I actually said what I think I should work on. And then number three, I said feedback and not
Yeah.
coaching, sorry, I said coaching and
Coaching,
not
not
feedback.
feedback.
Depends on the
Hmm.
environment. Some people will use feedback, some people use coaching. And
Yep.
then when we meet and you say, yes, I agree with that, or you say, well, actually, I don't think that's what you have to work on. I think it's
Hmm.
this. And
Hmm.
then what do I do? Because I'm like, that's actually not true. But I say, thank you so much for the feedback. I'm going to
Yeah.
take some time to process it and come back to you. And
Yeah.
then take the time, come back and decide what's the one thing you're going to work on and ask your team to hold you accountable to it.
Yeah. That's brilliant. And I love it. And you can imagine why people are so jaded
Yeah.
because they've maybe accepted that in good faith at some point, and then it's come back to hurt them.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
which happens all too often.
All too often.
So what about then in that case? I mean, what's people's recourse when either you have a boss who is not soliciting coaching or feedback and won't accept it, or they act like they're going to take it, but then it's coming to hurt you later on.
I mean, you have to be careful. Listen, I've witnessed organizations. I talk about this in The Devil Emails at Midnight. My former boss, nicknamed Tony, as in Tony Soprano. Yes, it's a great chapter. He came after people, right?
Yeah.
Anonymous and confidential, not always, right?
Yeah.
So I would say, whatever you're going to be putting down in writing for feedback for your boss, for a leader, for the organization, be willing to have your name on it and be willing to be able to say it to the person. That's the test, right? That's the test. And if you have a boss who's not open to feedback, then you have to work around it. That's, I mean, my advice is I dedicated the book to my kids, and I joked and I said, you know, when you come to me and your dad and say you have a bad boss, I'm going to hand you this book. We're all going to have a bad boss.
Yeah.
You don't resign every time you have a bad boss. The context and situation matters. If you are working for someone who is really negatively impacting your mental health and you are disappearing and you're losing yourself every week, you've got to make a get out plan and figure out how you're going to leave. But if it is a situation where you're, I'm sorry, working for micromanaging Mita, you can say, I'm going to do this for 6 months or a year, and I'm going to learn what I can. And I started doing this. I think I love this exercise. Open up your resume and don't wait till the assignment is done. Start writing those bullet points now. Think of that energy it creates. I'm going to survive micromanaging Mita for a year. I'm committing to this, but this is what I know. I'm going to get out of this assignment.
Ooh, that's good.
Why I'm staying.
That's
right?
good.
And so I think that's the calculation we each have to make on whether we stay or leave and when.
That's really good. You know, you talk about the bad boss who deliberately uses a wrong name for you, and you talk about that as microaggressions, or, you know, as Tiffany, Jana, and I call them in our book, subtle acts of exclusion. Not that that was subtle to you at all, right? But maybe it felt like subtle and not a big deal to him. But my question is about how much of the bad treatment you received by so many of these bad bosses might have been, at least in part, attributable to who you are and your identity and the bias that they might have had. Like, were they behaving badly equally to everyone, or is there some biases that they might have had?
I would agree. I mean, particularly with the story of my name, I do believe there was clear bias there. I think that, I mean, there's a few things people will say to me, did you actually have all these bad bosses? Like, how did you have so many bad bosses? So there are times when you work in a very large public company, people listening will know this, you can have 2 or 3 bosses in the same year because of acquisitions, people leaving, changes, teams combining. I will also say, given my cultural upbringing, I was always more introverted, painfully shy, quiet. I was a people pleaser. I think I attracted a lot of these individuals. So there's that as well. And then I do think there is, particularly when I think about the chapter around the great pretender, and that's, you know, someone who was a woman leader who was a mother who punished me for being pregnant, right? And so I do think there have been particularly lived experiences I've had, how I identify, and that it's hard to separate. It's who I am. So I cannot say that that did not play a role in some of these situations. Yeah,
and the gender bias in that chapter is obvious, right? And so troubling.
And that was an important one because it's not just men who can be biased against women, it's women who can be biased. It's all of us can have biases against each other, and so that was important to remind people of that.
Yeah, for sure. I have a question about this current moment, which in some ways is different, feels different. In some ways it's not. There's always turmoil. And when I even just saying this moment can mean a lot of different things, but there's some real anxiety going on in the workforce, especially in the US, maybe about, you know, people being scared to walk to work or drive to work in some places, or people existentially freaking out about like their constitutional rights, or people being re-traumatized by sexual assault from the news going on, or like people feeling abandoned because diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives are cut. Like there's so many things. What does a bad boss do in those circumstances when the workforce is struggling like that? And what could a good leader do instead?
I think one of the reasons bad boss behavior occurs is that when there's a lot of stress, particularly in the marketplace,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And so there's intense pressure on business right now,
Yeah.
particularly with our current administration. Do we know
Hmm.
if they're tariffs or taxes or we don't. And so I
Right.
think one of the things I'm watching out for, which is particularly troubling, is that when people feel a loss of control in their lives, they're looking for some sense of control. So it's
Mm.
very easy for someone who's managing people to find control in that way. And it reminds me of the pandemic, right? And the rise of the helicopter boss. The world is frozen and on fire at the same time, and all of
Mm.
a sudden I feel like I can't control anything. But you know what I can control? I can get on that meeting. I can email my team. I can make sure they CC me on everything. I can ask them the fifth time, when is the proposal due, even though I told them it's due next week, but let me ask them again, right? And so those are things that I'm watching out for. And I think, the push for RTO, return to office, there's a lot of, we've talked about that for a long time. There's a lot
Yeah.
of different reasons for that, but I also think it's a control,
Hmm.
right? It's like I get to sit outside my office, my glass corner office. I get to see my
Hmm.
team and I get to be like, Mita.
Hmm.
Just it makes me feel good and I feel like I'm in control. So,
Yeah.
what can good leaders do? I keep saying I don't write executive orders, I don't write policy. I can just show up for people and be
Hmm.
human. And I think we've forgotten the act of that, the importance of that. You
Yeah.
don't have to agree with policy. We can disagree on that, but you can stand up when it has to do with humanity and life or death. You
Yeah.
can start a meeting and saying, the headlines this weekend were tough. I'm,
Hmm.
I'm here if anyone wants to connect, if anyone needs some time off. It is
Yeah.
really hard. People want to feel seen, recognized, and valued.
Yeah.
Imagine, we don't have to imagine it. People are being shot and killed, in Minneapolis, and you're entering meetings and no one's talking about it. It's like
Right.
it didn't happen. I'll never
Right.
forget. I was fairly new at a company, and I was senior, and it was January 6th. It was the January 6th, and we're all in a very large meeting, and we're all in our homes. And guess what's happening? Every single person has their phone or CNN in the back,
Right.
watching the U.S. Capitol be
Right.
desecrated, and we're all just sitting there in some product launch meeting. And finally, I was like, is anyone else watching this?
Right.
And they're
Right.
like, oh my God, thank God you said something, because your employees are distracted anyways. So
Yeah.
just honor it and let
Yeah.
them know. And I think the other thing I want to say, Michael, which I think's a really tough time right now in the workplace, is that, I look at recent research from the New York Times, and it talks about how worship is down in the US. Synagogues, churches,
Hmm.
temples. Why is that
Hmm.
important? Religion is the oldest form of gathering for community. You
Hmm.
think about the loneliness epidemic. You think
Hmm.
about all these things, and people show up to work and they're demanding a lot of their workplaces. Many
Yes.
people are coming for community. And
Yeah.
so when government fails us, they say, well, business needs to step up. Michael,
Hmm.
you need to make a statement. Michael, you need
Hmm.
to do this. Michael, and it's that our workplace was not built for. But we can always lean into being human, and we can encourage people to donate, vote, call your legislature, write
Yeah.
checks, volunteer, whatever you can do to then take that energy, that hurt, that anger, that disappointment, everything happening, because the workplace can only do so much as well. And
Yeah.
we have to have that conversation. It cannot solve for everything else that's happening. It just can't. It doesn't mean it doesn't have a responsibility to step in and step up,
Right.
but it can't
Right.
can't do everything.
Right. And yet some of these things, they're like you said, they're essential for
Yes.
people to feel
Yeah.
seen and to just be able to even work without being so distracted or
Yes. Yes.
so just ruminating. What about generationally? Like how do you see this impacting new generations in the workforce?
Well, I think, people, I vote with my wallet. People also vote with their feet, right? I think there are
Hmm.
generations, and I hate to stereotype about generations. When people ask me,
Yeah.
it's like stereotyping about communities or identities.
Yep.
But what is happening and how people, if you are watching and you're being raised right now and watching your parents being let go and
Hmm.
watching them struggle to find work or finding work and then 3 years later being out of work again, that is going to inform
Yeah.
when my children who are young, when they enter the workforce.
Hmm.
And I do think the thing that we haven't talked about is that loyalty is dead in the workplace. And people
Mm.
sort of, they're like, you said that out loud? Well, I mean, listen, I remember I had, an uncle who used to work at a company, and 30 years after working, he got a gold Rolex. This is true,
Yeah.
a big public company. And
Yeah.
why that happened was, there was a social contract between
Mm.
employer and employee. You have healthcare, pension,
Hmm.
benefits. You will get a paycheck every 2 weeks in exchange for loyalty, and you will be there for 30, 40 years, and you will be taken care of. That no longer exists.
Yeah.
And so that acknowledgement of what that's going to look like next year and in 5 years, that, in the US, I've always been an at will employee. But isn't it an interesting world to think about? You have a workforce where maybe 20% is executive leadership, leadership that stays, but then that 80% is actually contract. Like
Yeah.
every year we're sort of up for renewal, which is what? That seems like a dystopian world. I don't think we're
Mm.
far from that.
Yeah, you're making me think about some of the unease I have with the way that some companies talk about belonging, or like we're all a family.
Oh, please, no. Cancel. Family analogy. Sorry, I don't cancel things that easily, but the family analogy at work, oh God. Ugh. God,
Where
sorry.
yeah, no, no. Hey, that's what I'm talking
Had a
about.
visceral
It's
reaction
like,
there.
yeah, like you have to be my family and not leave me, but I'll
Right.
fire you in a heartbeat. Right.
I mean, yeah. I mean, maybe family does this, but like locks you out of the building and you get a text at 2 a.m. saying, check your email. I mean, all the ways that people have
Yeah.
been let go, it's outrageous, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't treat people that way when they've served you and helped you and
Yeah.
worked with your company and made impact. Where's the dignity in how
Yeah.
you have them close this chapter?
Yeah, or just the
Humanity.
humanity. My
Exactly.
gosh.
It's
Like,
just,
sure, if you're stealing from the company, escort people out with a
right.
security guard. But if
Yes.
you're just a normal
Right.
person,
Exactly.
oh, yeah,
And
it's
isn't it
maddening.
funny how exactly what you said, some of these layoffs, they make you feel like you're a criminal and you
Right.
did something wrong, where you did everything you could to try to do your
Hmm.
job well,
Yeah.
and then one day you're no longer there.
Yeah. 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 Oof, gosh. Yeah. Yeah, the time, it's, I don't like stereotyping generations either, but sometimes it's also just time in life stuff. Like I work
Yes.
with a lot of companies where people are like, the older folks who maybe have kids are like, I want to go in and do my thing, and then I need to get back to my family
Sure.
and do my thing there. Whereas younger people joining maybe like want a community in a different
Yes.
sort of
Yeah.
way,
Absolutely.
and purpose and connection and friends, and because of all that stuff you talked about. Um, Speaking of, like, there's so many great tips in here. What about, like, what would you say is transferable? Like, in other words, what skills do bosses need? But it's also good skills for friendships or romantic relationships or parenting or just anything in general.
Hmm. I mean, it's actually leads to the title of the book, which is The Devil Emails at Midnight. Time is the most precious commodity in any relationship we have. It's the biggest complaint. And so the book opens up with the boss who never had time for me,
Right.
except at midnight. She would dump her emails on me from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. And that's how I got time with her. It's
Yeah.
wild. And I just wanted to
Yeah.
be valued, seen, and recognized. So are we doing that for each other? And in the time,
Hmm.
people keep asking me, what are you doing in this time? I'm like, I'm trying to be a light for others, and I want others to be a light for me. This
Yeah.
conversation and you inviting me on
Yeah.
the podcast is meaningful. And I know a lot of people are
Yeah.
listening in, but how can we show up for each other? And sometimes it seems like the darkest moments, but we're the light, whether it's
Yeah.
something we're going through in work, whether it's many things happening in our world today, is just leaning in on each other. And I said, my daughter says, sprinkle kindness everywhere. Just
I love it.
sprinkle it everywhere.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's really great. I love that. What does the best case scenario look like for you in terms of work and leadership? What's the fantasy you imagine could happen?
People have the opportunity to reach their potential at work, that
Hmm.
they have that opportunity. And that's not everyone does, that the environment
Yeah.
is created so that you can go and do great work. And that a lot
Hmm.
of these things that we talk about doesn't matter. right? But we know it matters. And so
Yeah.
that's like what utopia looks like, is that we all are excited. And listen, it's not that work is joyful every day. That's not possible. But
Right.
we're happy about the work we're doing.
Hmm.
We're happy we're
Hmm.
being recognized and rewarded. We're making impact.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. Love it. Okay. So I often give people, if they want to, a little activity or something they could read or watch or do. One of those activities I would assign for them is certainly getting and reading the book.
Oh, thank you.
Um, is there anything else you think people might do that would be an interesting little optional kind of homework assignment?
I'm a big fan of journaling and writing.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
actually think that we've lost that art form because we are, what's the latest you're using? Notion or a
Mhm.
spreadsheet or a Claude. I mean, there's so much technology we have at our disposal, but I'd love for people to find a beautiful notebook and a pen
Yeah.
and actually sit with yourself. And, you don't have to be a writer to do this, but once a week you could set a timer and just write reflections. And it could
Yeah.
be, as I've done, it could be a career journal. It could
Yeah.
be specifically about work. It could be specifically about something else in your life. But I'd love for us to go back to that old school journal and pen and
Yeah.
paper. There's just something so beautiful about that. And also the mind, at least for me, processing. When I write
Yeah.
things down versus type them and I'm writing it, I feel it. I feel it in
Yeah.
my heart and my mind.
Yeah, completely. Well, and then you can find it 20 years later in your childhood
Yes, and then
home.
maybe it's a book.
Exactly.
I have many behind me, Michael, many a journal. There's more books
That's
coming.
awesome. I love that. Okay, Mita, where can people find you, connect with you?
Yes. Well, I hope you'll purchase the book and read it. The Devil Emails of Midnight, Good Leaders, What Good Leaders Can Learn from Bad Bosses. I also did the audio, which was quite fun.
Oh,
And
nice.
LinkedIn's my preferred social media platform, although I am on TikTok now, which has been exciting. And you can
Hmm.
find me at mitamallick.com. And thank you so much for having me.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for being here. The book is a great read and just so helpful. And thank you for doing the work that you do and for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you.
All right, take care.